Let's get into the details on how to configure your shootable weapon. I'm going to assume that you've already seen the videos on how to set up your scene, how to set up your character, the items, the item types. And for this video, I'm going to mostly focus on setting up the shootable weapon. I'm going to set up an assault rifle and a bow, since those are two kind of wide variety common use cases. And again, I'm not going to go into too much detail or overview on how to do the stuff that the videos have already gone over, the previous videos have already gone over. So I'm going to go through this item manager fairly quickly, but I'll still kind of give a brief overview of what it's about. So make sure, yeah, you've seen the other videos. So the name of the shootable weapon that we want to create is my assault rifle. It should have an item definition or an item type of my assault rifle. The character that we want to assign it to is Nolan. It should have an animator ID of 1. That's a very important value, just so that the character or the animator knows the unique ID of the item and it can identify it. If you haven't seen the other video, definitely go through and watch that, because I go into a lot of detail on what that's about. So the first person base are these arms that are underneath Nolan right now. So that looks good. That was set up when you created your character. You can also set these up right now if you were to specify a new game object that isn't under the Nolan character hierarchy. So if I wanted to create a new set of arms using this item manager, I can, but since I want to use these same arms, I'm just going to leave it as is. I now want to set up an assault rifle, and so I'm going to find my assault rifle model. I'm going to drag that in. I want the assault rifle to be a child of the arms, or the right hand, and so let me drag in the right hand and making sure I'm underneath the first person right hand. I need to add a slot to that right hand, and I need to specify an animator controller for the assault rifle. So that all looks good. Let's do something similar for a third person, and third person has a little bit less options. So the action type is shootable weapon, and we want to assign my assault rifle bullet to the consumable item definition or the consumable item type, since we're only concerned about item types in this case. State configuration and profile, I'm going to leave those empty. Those basically allow you to have a pre-configured set of values that you apply to your new item, and there's a video on that showing in detail what that's about, but we want to configure our item completely, and I recommend that you do the same. So I'm going to leave all those blank. Let's go ahead and hit build item now, and we should see that the character now has an assault rifle in both first person and third person. The assault rifle is not positioned correctly at all, but hey, it's there, so we did step 1. Step 2 is to configure the transform of this visible item so that it is in the correct position. And if you remember, let me just get this out of the way, we don't need it right now. If you remember, we can do that by just changing the transform values. So I can do that by just positioning it like so. I've already positioned this assault rifle in the demo scene. So instead of going through that process of configuring the assault rifle again with the values, I'm just going to take the assault rifle values that I have already configured. So I am going to just stop Unity, and then I'm going to quickly copy and paste these values because I know they will look good. At least I hope they will look good. And now let's go ahead and hit play. And this is first person. So under the first person, the assault rifle should be in the correct position. So that looks good. I'm ignoring the arms right now. There's a few issues, but the assault rifle looks good, and I just happen to know that the assault rifle position and rotation is the same in first and third person. That won't always be the case depending on the rig you're using, but in our case it is. So now when I switch to third person, we can see that the assault rifle is positioned correctly. The next obvious problem is on the arms in first person. You can see there's two things. One, the arms kind of pop in and out depending on my zoom level and rotation level. And then also they are positioned incorrectly. Let's take care of the popping in and out first, And this is because the render bounds on these arms, let me click on one, on the mesh is way over here, so Unity doesn't think that it actually needs to render this mesh. So we can adjust these render bounds by clicking this edit bounds button and then manually making that change. I'm going to want to do it when I'm in edit mode, just so the changes persist. And this is kind of a boring process, so I'm going to speed up the video right now as I go through and configure these render bounds. All I'm literally doing is, actually I just restarted the wrong one. All I'm literally doing is just configure, or just copying these values for these 4 different skin mesh renderers: left arm, left armor, right arm, right armor. So I'll go ahead and do that now. I just configured these different values, and now when I hit play, we should see that the arms are always in view no matter what rotation or zoom I'm using. So that looks good. Now let's go ahead and actually let's get back to play mode and let's change these arm positions so that the assault rifle, the arms are in the correct location. Now the controller is structured so that there are these visible items right here that have their own game object. This is the third-person version, and then the first-person version is right here. And these visible items are configured and moved based off of the main game object for that item. This main game object is located underneath your character items, then the name of the item, and this has all your configuration components related to that item. So what we want to do now is adjust the position offset for this assault rifle. And we can do that by going to the first person perspective item, and I'm changing this position offset. Now I'm going to just show it here, but I'm going to also cheat again and get some values that I know work. But you can see here, you can see it moving around, so it's just a matter of playing with it to get the right value. And I'm going to cheat again and use some values that I know will work. So I am going to stop the game, and now I am going to just bring over a few different these values. So this position offset specifies, actually that was the wrong position offset for the X. This position offset specifies the location of the arms during normal play mode. This exit offset specifies the position of the arms when the character is equipping the item, or starting to equip the item, or is ending the equip, or is ending the unequip. Yeah, I said that right. So for example, when you start unequipping the item, it's going to start at this position, and then at the end of the unequip, it will be at this exit offset. So in this case, it's going to move the assault rifle down by a little bit on the y-axis. There's a similar set of values for rotation, and you can see when the assault rifle is acting normally, it has no rotation. When it is going to unequip, it is moving to this rotation with a value of 30. So now when I hit play, we should see that the assault rifle is positioned correctly. And that looks good. All right, so now we have it configured so that the assault rifle is positioned correctly in both first and third person. Let's go ahead and actually change some of these properties for the shootable weapon. And we can do that under this shootable weapon component. One of the first things that we want to change is, as I'm firing, you can see I can fire, and that looks good, but I don't know if you can hear my mouse click, but I'm clicking the mouse and he's not still firing right now. He should continuously be firing. And I can do that by changing this fire mode from semi-auto to full auto. Now when I fire, we should see the character is just continuously firing and I have my mouse held down. So that looks good. Besides this animation from the assault rifle moving, you can't really tell that the assault rifle is actually firing. So I think we need a muzzle flash. Let's go ahead and add a muzzle flash. And I can do that by opening up the object manager. And then under these different object types, I want to create a muzzle flash. Now the muzzle flash that I want to use is a mesh that will slowly decrease in opacity as the weapon fires, and that I have a good mesh located somewhere in this demo folder. Let's see, models. Actually, what I'm going to do, instead of trying to guess which one it is, we have a muzzle flash that's already created. And let me just bring that in. Let's see, we want to do the assault rifle muzzle flash. So I'll just drag that in. And I do want to show it how it works and all that, so I am going to still create a new game object, but I'm taking this muzzle flash right here and using that as the game object. We will call this assault rifle muzzle flash. We will build the object, and sure, we'll save it right there. So now we have that created. Let's just drag it in just to see what it looks like. We want to remove this animation component. I think that was brought in from Unity. And you can see it added the muzzle flash component, which that was basically all that this object builder did. But it's good to use the object builder just in case there are other components that are added. Another component, or what we also need to change the material, and then we need to add a light source for the muzzle flash. So I guess I'm going to admit defeat. I'm going to use the muzzle flash we already had created instead of you watching me drag this in and then add the light. But that is how you create a muzzle flash. So let me just delete that, and I will delete that as well, because now under the shootable weapon component, I am going to just specify muzzle flash under the muzzle flash section. So if I search for muzzle flash under my assets, see I have a few different options. I'm making sure I use the one from the assault rifle. So now I have it. We want to add a shell to the assault rifle so that when it fires, this shell gets spawned, like the assault rifle is actually firing. And there's one that is already created. But if you didn't have one that was already created, you can create one through this object builder as well. It will just add the required components for that shell. So that will work. Now let's go ahead and hit play and just see what happens. I have a feeling I know what's going to happen. But now if we hit play, we do have a muzzle flash, but it's in the incorrect position. And we can change that by clicking on the assault rifle, and let's go ahead and change the location of the muzzle flash. Let's say we probably want it to appear right out here. So let's move it to right there. And now when we fire, that looks a lot better. The muzzle flash will have the same location that this fire point does, because this should be the location that the weapon actually fires from. So I copied that transform. Let me just paste these transform values in. So we have a similar set of values. And this was for first person. I got to do the same thing for third person. And because it's the same assault rifle, I am going to be using the same values. So that looks good. Now when I hit play and I switch to first or third person, we should see that the muzzle flash is working correctly. Now you can kind of see as I'm firing, you can see some shells being emitted, and they actually look like they're positioned okay. But let's go ahead and adjust the shell eject point as well, just to be a little bit higher. And then we can have it be a little bit inward as well. So now let's go ahead and copy that transform. Let's hit play just to make sure it looks good. So that looks good. And now we'll reposition that shell eject point. So let's go ahead and paste that. Now we can hit play. And that looks a lot better. So both first and third person will work correctly with that. Let me go ahead. The next, pretty much last step now with the assault rifle is to set the reloadable clip and allow the character to reload. In order to do this though, I'm going to go back to the setup manager and I'm going to add a UI just so that we can see how many bullets the character has left. And in addition to that, I'm going to set an icon on the assault rifle so that we know, we can see in the UI that, hey, the assault rifle is equipped. Let's go ahead and find that property and we will set assault rifle icon. Now when we hit play, we should be able to see the value. So that's working well. I don't have any ammo to reload with, so I can modify my starting ammo by going to the default loadout, and instead of 50, I'm going to do 500. Now let's go ahead and hit play, and let's see what happens. So I'm going to get this assault rifle in view. The same thing will happen with first and third person. Now if I reload, you can see the animation plays, but the clip doesn't actually eject. And there's a couple of reasons for that, but let's go ahead and modify some properties to get that clip to eject. I can do so. The very first thing that I want to do in order to eject the clip is to first set the, let's see, where is it? Under reload, this reload, detach, attach clip, we want to enable that just to make sure the weapon knows that it should detach the clip. And there are a couple of transforms that you now need to set. And one of those transforms is the reloadable clip and the reloadable clip attachment location. The reloadable clip is on the assault rifle, and this is the clip that is actually, or the mesh that is actually removed when it is reloaded. And the assault rifle was modeled so that this clip can be removed, and we just drag that in. We need to do something similar for both first and third person since they're different visible items. So let's just drag that in, reloadable clip. And then the other thing that we need to do is the set the attachment location, and this is the game object that the clip attaches to when the character is reloading. So let's set that to the character's left hand, because when the character is reloading, the left hand should be the one that is that holds the clip. So now I'll just drag the left hand in. That's for third person, and now you know the drill. We got to do something similar for first person. And let's drag the left hand in to first person. So now when we hit play, we should see the character successfully reloading that clip in both first and third person. So let's fire a bit, and perfect. Let's do third person as well and see it work. So yeah, it did. All right. So that aspect is working well. And so we got a assault rifle configured. That wasn't so bad. All right, let's go ahead and create the bow. We've done this a few times, so I'm going to go through fairly quickly. The name is my bow. It has a similar item type name. The character we want to assign it to is Nolan. It has a unique animator ID of 4 for our demo scene. We want to assign it to the first person arms, and I did our search already for the bow, and let's just drag that model file in. We want to use the left hand instead of the right hand, so instead of that item parent, let's create a new item slot, and you'll notice there is now a new item slot for the left hand. Let's go ahead and use the bow animator controller. The third person item is very similar. You'll see as a nice convenience feature, it defaults to the same parent that the first person perspective was. So the items is in the left hand right now, so it's going to default to the left hand. The animator controller should be the bow as well. Action type can be left at shootable weapon. The consumable item type is the arrow for the bow, which we had created earlier. The state configuration and the profile should be left empty so that we can do all of the configuration ourselves. Now that that's created, let's go ahead and hit play just to see what happens. I would expect the assault rifle to be equipped first, and that is because, well, we can now switch to the bow, and it switches, but we have some issues here. So the first step is to make the bow appear first, and we can do that by changing the item set manager. We'll change the order so the bow appears before the assault rifle. So now when I hit play, we should see a value, or the bow should be equipping first. It doesn't look great, but the bow does equip first, so that's good. The next step should be a familiar step, is we will go through and position the visible item to be in the correct location. And I already have some values for this that I use in the demo scene, so I'm just gonna copy those values. So I'm gonna speed up this video as I do that, just so you don't have to just keep watching me repositioning the values. So I'll go do that now. All right, so now I've copied the values. Let's go ahead and hit play just to make sure the visible item is positioned correctly. In the scene view, that looks good, and the game view, not so much, but we'll be able to fix that. Third person looks good. So for the first person view, let's take a look, and we can see that looks like the arms need to be adjusted. So we can do that under the My Bow first person perspective item component, and we want to decrease the Y value. I have a Y value that works well for the demo scene, so I'm just going to copy that same value. So this value works well, and let's just drag that in. And we're also going to set the exit offset, so now when the bow is unequipped, it will move down a little bit. So let me just switch between the assault rifle and the bow. So that definitely looks better. And if I switch to the assault rifle, that switches appropriately as well. If we go back to third person view, and we can really see it when we aim, but the character is extremely flexible. And the reason for that is because the animator requires a certain movement set for the bow. And this can be set with this field right here. And I'm going to set the movement set value to 2. The reason for this, it's completely dependent on the animator that you design. And this is just kind of one more way that the animator knows that, hey, this should be a bow position, or the animation should be in kind of a bow stance rather than a shootable weapon stance. For the demo animator controller, a movement set ID of 2 is used for the bow, melee uses 1, and everything else uses 0, and 0 is the default. So by doing that, the stance should be a lot better for third person when the character is aiming. So yeah, the character's arms are no longer through the body. So that's definitely an improvement. The next problem that we have is that there is no arrow on the bow, and we can solve that by going to the shootable weapon component and scrolling down to the projectile, which looks like it's right here. It should be in this area. Yeah, right here. We are going to use the arrow projectile, and this arrow projectile was created through the object manager, so just by selecting projectile, and that adds all the necessary components. This arrow is the same one that we're using in the demo scene. We want to have the arrow fire faster at the start, so we're going to increase the magnitude. The projectile visibility should be always, because we always want the arrow to be visible. The start layer is fine for third person, but for first person, you'll notice when the arrow spawns, it's completely in the wrong position right now, but that's fine. You'll notice that as I move this arrow, it's always behind the arms and the bow. And the reason for that is we're using the standard render pipeline, and the standard render pipeline, in order to have these first person arms not obstruct anything, they need to be stacked. And so this second camera is rendering the arms, and the arrow is not rendering on the second camera. We can fix that by either changing that first person, or that start layer, directly to the overlay layer, which is layer 29, or we can use the state machine to change it for us between the different first and third person perspective. If you're only using a first person perspective, changing this directly is what I would recommend. But because we have to switch back and forth between the two perspectives, we need to use the state system in order to add it. There's a video that goes through the details of the state system. So I recommend watching that video, but let's go ahead and add the state for the first person bow perspective item, or the shootable weapon. So now when I hit play, this state will become active when I'm in first person. You'll see a little active indicator. Yeah, see it's active. And the layer of this arrow will be on the overlay layer. So now when it goes through, when it's obstructing the different objects, you can actually see it's in the correct ordering. So that looks good. The thing that doesn't look good is the location of the arrow and also the parent of the arrow. So it's best demonstrated with third person. Oops, I just switched items. But let me pull back. Notice I'm pulling back the arrow, but I'm pulling back the bowstring, but the arrow isn't actually moving with it. And the reason for that is because the arrow is on the left hand, whereas the character's animation is pulling back on the right hand. We can fix that by creating a new game object that represents the location that the arrow should spawn. And in between the break between the shootable weapon and this video, or this section of the video, I created this arrow attachment game object. There's nothing special about this game object. It's just a brand new game object. And then I gave it the correct transform location, which I found by changing the location manually at runtime, just like how you've seen me position the visible item location. So I have this arrow attachment game object, and it's underneath the right hand, and I want the arrow to spawn here. And I can do that by going to the bow, just going all the way to the bottom, and there's this fire point attachment location field, and that's what I want to set for both first and third person. So for first person, it's under the first person right arms, and for third person, that object is under the third person right arms. There's also a muzzle flash and a shell location set. You can delete those if you want to. It doesn't hurt anything by having it, and I'll just leave it there for now. But now we can see that the arrow is actually not spawned in the correct position. It must be because I didn't set this location correctly for the first person arms. Actually, it doesn't look like it's spawning at all underneath the right arms. So I probably set the position incorrect on this transform or this component. So this should be for third person. Oh, yep, I just switched it. So this should be for first person. Let me have the correct one. So the first person Nolan arms should have this attachment, and the third person should have this attachment. So I just swapped those around. So now it should work better. Yeah, it looks a whole lot better. Let me switch to third person and pull back. Notice how the arrow gets pulled back. All right, so that's looking good. Let's go ahead and actually try firing. And I released my mouse, but he's not doing anything. Looks like we have some more properties to adjust. Let's go back to the bow, or we're already at the bow. Let's go to the shootable weapon component. Scroll up a little bit, and the first thing that we want to adjust is this use event. So when the character pulls back the arrow or the bow, it's starting to use the item. It's starting to use this bow. And as soon as you release, you want it to be released immediately. You don't want it to have to wait for an animation to play in order for it to be released. So we are going to deselect that and then set a duration to 0 so that it just happens instantly. The use event happens instantly. As soon as you release, the character is going to fire the bow. This use complete event specifies when the attack or the use animation should end, and we want it to end after 0.25 seconds. And what that's going to do is give it a little bit of time to play the release animation. And in our animator, we have a release animation substate index of 12. This is a value that was just specified by our animator, and there's nothing too unique about this value other than just when the bow is released, this value will play. And we can actually, that would be a good example of showing where I am getting that value. Since, let's see, let's go back to the characters animator. On the arm layer, there's bow, and you can see that this is the animation that plays when the character starts to pull back and you're waiting to release. And then there's this release animation that should play when the item is actually used. And this transition has a substate index of 12, and that's where that 12 was set. So that's a way to verify that that value is set correctly. Let's go back to the bow because we have a couple other configurations changes to make. The next one we're going to change is this fire type, and instead of instant fire we should do charge and hold, and let's change this length. And what this will allow us to do is to hold the mouse for a duration, and then as soon as you release the mouse, that's when the weapon actually fires. So this mid charge length, if the mouse is released before 0.2 seconds, it will not fire the bow. Between 0.2 and 0.5 seconds, it will it'll fire the bow at partial strength, and then anything over 0.5 seconds or any hold duration over 0.5 seconds, it will be a full strength shot. So now we should see the arrow being released correctly. And I like third person for the bow because it's easier to see. And good. Except it looks like there's a little bit of a delay and I'm not getting my arrow back. This can be fixed by changing the reload clip size. Right now the bow thinks that it has a whole bunch of ammo, so it's not actually going to reload, but it does need to reload to a new arrow. So now when I hit play again, I like third person for the view. Now I shoot and I release, and perfect. So that's a bow that is configured. For both this, for the bow and for the assault rifle, I didn't bother texturing or setting the material for the actual model file, but that's just a Unity specific or a Unity feature, nothing specific to the character controller. So there we go.